Hey guys, we're back and we're in the Encyclopedia of the Ancient World, and today we're going to be talking about the discovery of ancient Egypt. And what do I mean by the discovery of ancient Egypt? Well, ancient Egypt had always been there, right? It had been there for centuries, and lots of different pharaohs and dynasties were going on. And so when I say discover, I mean discovered by what we would call Europeans, okay? So the ancient Egyptian civilization is there, and it's been there, like I said, for a very long period of time. And it starts to wane, starts to get to the ending of its kind of expanse at that point. So around 30 BC, Egypt winds up becoming part of the Roman Empire, and it was discovered by the Romans, right? So, but then as Romans came in, their different religion, Christianity, and Christianity starts to dominate the entire region. And all of these pyramids that were there for the gods and for the kings and the worshiping of all these different gods kind of get pushed to the background. And eventually, because of the domination of the Roman Empire, they start to completely fade into the background and are almost completely forgotten about. Then, about 200 years ago, give or take a few years, European explorers are in the area once again, and they start to take some interest in these ancient Egyptian sites, the pyramids and the different temples and things. And they start to look at more and more of it, and eventually they truly become obsessed with it, okay? And the one of the things they start to find is that the Egyptian people in their early history started to write down everything. The Egyptians wrote down, things that were to glorify the gods and the kings. They wrote down their government issues. They had some poetry. They wrote everything. But because a lot of it was to glorify the gods or to glorify the kings, they weren't sure if it was all completely accurate, okay? But they also had problems interpreting it, right? So the first real history of Egypt came from a Greek named Herodotus, okay? And he was known as the father of history, and so he wanted to write down everything. And around 500 BC, he visits Egypt, and he starts to write down mostly everything that he was told. He doesn't have the grasp of the language, doesn't know what's going on, but he's asking lots of questions, and he starts to write everything down. As the Roman Empire dominates the area, you get into the Ptolemaic period, right, where the Ptolemies are running and ruling over and over again, and get multiple of them. You get Ptolemy II. And at this point, he is wanting a history of the area as well. And he pays an Egyptian scribe to write the history of Egypt. We know this person as Manetho. He was an Egyptian priest, historian, etc., etc. And he is the one who divides Egypt into 30 different dynasties, or groups of kings, right? And it's the system that we still use today. But most of this is secondhand information, and we're not exactly sure what to do with it. And as in the 18th century, they start finding more, they're exploring more. The explorers find it very difficult to make sense of any of the ancient monuments. There's what they believe to be writings, which we now know as hieroglyphics written on them, but they don't know what it is. They don't know how to interpret them. They don't know why. They couldn't read it. They didn't know who built them, what they were built for. They really had no idea, but they were still out there exploring and looking at things. Then, in another part of history, we have a war between Britain and France, right? And this war stumbles into Egypt in around 1798. It's with Napoleon, and Napoleon comes in there. He goes to Egypt to fight, but Napoleon also was a big historian and wanted to explore the area. So even though he's going there to fight the British, he brings a large team of scholars and scientists to study Egypt. And as the soldiers are in the area, they're preparing for battle. They're fighting some battles. At some point, the soldiers make this discovery. It's a large slab of black stone. It's near the Mediterranean Sea at Rosetta. You guessed it, right? The Rosetta Stone. So, but we don't. That's what we know it is now. At that point, there's this weird stone they have, right? And it has 3 different scripts written on it: Greek, hieroglyphics, and heractic, which is a simplified form of hieroglyphics. Like I said, we know that as the Rosetta Stone. And so Napoleon gets this and takes it, and it starts to be studied by a Frenchman named Jean-Francois Champollion and a young Englishman whose name is Thomas Young. And after studying this for a very long period of time, they're able to decipher the hieroglyphics. And at this point, interest in studying Egypt, and now that they can interpret things, becomes almost a fascination. It becomes, a big deal. Lots of people do it. And it becomes this new academic subject, really. Lots of universities want to study it. Lots of universities are sending people to study it. And we come up with what we could still study in a lot of colleges today called Egyptology. So they're studying Egyptology now, right? And it becomes, like I said, extremely popular. And lots of people are wanting to go check this area out. And unfortunately, before we had true archaeology, we had some reckless plundering that was going on in the area, okay? These early explorers would go over there and they would just kind of ransack the temples and the tombs, and they truly caused a lot of damage. And most of the treasures during this time period were taken out of Egypt. They were removed from the area, taken back to, England or France, other places where they could put on display and kind of a look what we found. One of these explorers is a guy named Belzoni the Giant. His real name is Giovanni Belzoni. For a long period of time, he was a circus strongman, and then winds up in Egypt through some other business deals and things. And he's just a monster of a man. He's 6'7" tall, huge, and has a kind of a fascination with black powder and dynamite. And so he's over there literally just blowing things up, trying to find the money, the treasures that are there. And he opens many tombs in Abu Simbel and the Valley of the Kings. And like I said, not doing it in a way that is great for any archaeology aspect. Then you have a guy named Auguste Mariette. He's a Frenchman, and he winds up in Egypt as well. And he goes to Saqqara, and there's a lot of different temples and things there. And without any permission, he just decides he's going to start digging in the area and see what he can find. And he finds a huge underground tomb that they call the Serapeum. And he starts doing some excavations, and he's digging out a lot of things. And some of it winds up back in France. But to his credit, even though he wasn't doing things quite right, he creates the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And so a lot of his discoveries actually stayed in Egypt, which was good. We also have a man named William Flanders Petrie. He was a very eccentric Englishman. He was hot in the area. No kidding, right? He's in the desert. And he didn't want to wear his normal clothes. So he had these kind of thinner, long pantsed pajamas, underwear basically. And so he would just wear these out in the desert in his attempt to stay cool. And so he got this nickname of the man in the pink underwear, because he literally would just be out working in his pink underwear. And even though he was extremely eccentric, he started in kind of this modern archaeology stuff where he had very careful methods of excavation, very detailed and disciplined. He decided you could learn a lot from very small objects. So everything he found, he would record, and did it very meticulously, and wanted to make sure that things were not destroyed. And he compared thousands of pots and pieces of pots, and began to start sorting out some of the mysteries of Egypt's earlier history, and which was great for us, and it kind of showed the importance of doing things the right way. And like I said, he was the one who started this kind of beginning of modern archaeology. And even though they're doing it properly, or starting to do it properly at this time point, they're still just looking for treasures. And what they find as they're going through different tombs and different things is that most of the tombs were robbed and ransacked in ancient times. There's not much treasure there to be found. People started to believe it was all gone, and then some people wanted to push on though. And one of those people was a Howard Carter. He was a British Egyptologist, And he truly believed in his heart that there was a tomb of the boy king, Tutankhamun, right? King Tut, as we know him, was still to be found. And he just knew he could find it. He was determined to find it. And so in 1917, he starts the hunt for King Tut's tomb. But he needs somebody to pay for it, right? And if there's treasure to be found, somebody's going to try to help him find it. So we have this Lord Carnarvon, who is a rich British person who funds his search, right? He gives him the money to do it. So Carter goes on this hunt, and the first 4 years, he's searching all over the place, digging all over the place, and he finds absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. The Egyptian authorities are involved at this point, and they think it's just a complete, total waste of time, and they're like, dude, you just need to give up. But he says, no, I don't want to. And they kind of go back and forth for a little while, and he literally begs the Egyptian authorities for one more year. And so they finally say, okay. And he starts over again in November of 1922. And in the area he's looking at, there's these workmen's huts. And he's kind of thinking, if I could get these out of the way, maybe I could find something over this area, give me a place where I could set up. And so he starts to work on moving these ancient work huts out of the way. And as he does so, he literally just stumbles into some steps that lead down to a tomb. He wasn't even trying to necessarily search that area. He's trying to get these stuff out of the way so he can figure out where he's going to search, and he finds these steps. At this point, he gets super excited. He sends a telegram to Lord Carnarvon that says, basically, we made a discovery. Wonderful discovery. They're in the Valley of the Kings, and the tomb with seals are still intact, and you might want to come check this out. So in November 25th of 1922, Lord Carnarvon is on scene. He's there. Carter enters the tomb, and he screams out, basically, we found wonderful things. I see wonderful things. But remember, this man is very meticulous about how he does things, right? And so he enters the first room, and it's full of objects that are just kind of heaped together in a big pile. There's chariots and statues and chests and chairs and other stuff. They're just all kind of piled in a heap in the middle of the room. He also sees 2 statues that are guarding the door at the end of it. But he doesn't rush through anything, right? So he slowly starts to clear out the first room and record every single thing that he's bringing out. So piece by piece by piece, he's slowly bringing it up. That takes him about 3 months or so. So finally, in February of 1923, he gets to the second room. Inside the second room, he finds 4 wooden shrines that are covered in gold, a solid stone sarcophagus, and another open room beyond filled with amazing objects, as he claims. Again, he's incredibly patient. He wants to record every single thing, and it took years to go through this room. Years. So much so that the sarcophagus that's sitting in that second room doesn't get open for 3 years later. When he opens it, he finds 3 coffins that are inside. These coffins are nestled one inside each other, and the first 2 are made of gilded wood, so they're wood covered in gold. The third one, though, is completely solid gold inlaid with precious stones. Finally open this one up, and inside they find an intact mummy. Its face is covered with a beautiful gold mask. If you look up a gold mask of Egypt right now, you should see it in your book. It's the very one that's used in pretty much every picture of the gold mask. It's recognized worldwide, and this is the one that Carter found. Lord Carnarvon at this point, though, develops pneumonia. And he's in Cairo, in Egypt, and on April 5th, 1923, he dies from pneumonia. He never saw King Tut's coffin or his mask. He never saw any of it. He died. The newspapers start running this information that say he died because of the curse of the mummy. And rumors start to grow, and they start to spread. And so what they're trying to say then is that anytime you disturb a mummy, you're going to die. And it becomes this big theory and myth that's going on. However, Carter and many others who have done this excavation lived for many, many years. And so, like I said, this is just kind of, it's called the discovery of ancient Egypt, and the discovery by Europeans who who kind of act like they're the ones that found everything, even though it had been there for years and years and years. And what it did do, though, is it brought attention to the ancient Egyptian civilization and lifestyle. And because of some of those discoveries, the Rosetta Stone and other things, it did create a new study of Egyptology, and we were able to translate and recognize things and read all the things the Egyptians wrote down. And it's still stuff that goes on today. And with the proper excavation, the proper archaeology that's taking place, it's amazing to see what's discovered and what's going on. And so just make sure you're reading the material. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.